19mm socket, take off all of the lug nuts, and then we'll take the wheel off. With a 10mm socket, let's remove this nut over here. This holds the ABS wire onto the control arm, and then to create more slack, I'm going to take it off the knuckle as well. Be gentle with this one. They often break into the knuckle, and then you'll have to drill it out. And right down here, there's another bolt. You can remove this one too. Okay, now the ABS wire is completely out of our way. Set that aside. Next, let's take off the upper ball joint castle nut. Remove the cotter pin that is in here. If yours is old and rotted, then just go ahead and take the nut off with it on. Next, take your 17mm socket, remove the nut. Then take a hammer on the knuckle. That should break the control arm free from the knuckle. Okay, pop that off. Make sure the knuckle doesn't fall forward too much. Leave it here. And at this point, we need to actually disconnect the strut from the top. Let's remove these shields here that cover the strut. Okay, set those aside. Then we'll have to remove this brace here so that we can get access to all three of the strut bolts. You can see two of them here, but the other one is underneath, so you won't be able to get to it. So I have new hardware here, so for me they're 13s, but typically they are 12mm nuts. Go ahead and take all three of these out on this side and then do the same to the other side. Take this off and just move it to the side. And usually the nuts for the strut are 14mm, mine are 15. Last one, the strut's going to want to drop down. At this point, you can pull down on this, and what this is going to do is it's going to allow these bolts to line up between the spring so that you can actually take them out. So let's get a 14mm wrench in there and break those free. Okay, this one's loose. Let's see, I'm gonna adjust the positioning of the strut so we can fit this between the springs. Or between the spring. There's only one spring. Okay, there's one. There it is. Pull the control arm right out. I'm going to want to take this boot off so I can get a clear access to the ball joint so I can pop it off. And there's a little locking ring here that you can most likely get off with a pick. There we go. Take this off. Now you can take the boot off of the ball joint. And I'm just going to wipe off all this grease, that way it doesn't accidentally make a mess in here while I work. This ball joint is going to press up towards the top, that's how it comes out. And if you look here, this lip at the bottom is actually part of the control arm. So what we're going to have to do is press on this part of the ball joint, have a receiving cup here that will receive the ball joint as the ball joint press pushes it through, and well, then it'll pop right out. So let's get some adapters in here and I'll show you my setup. So here's what I have going on here. I have the receiving cup, a little adapter so that the ball joint press has something to press up against, and then I just have the ball joint press right up against the ball joint. I'm going to take my tool, tighten this up, and that's going to squeeze the ball joint out of the control arm. There's the old ball joint. Throw this one out. Now this new ball joint that I have is a camber adjustment ball joint. You might not need this, but usually if you wanted to alter the alignment, the camber of the front end of your vehicle, you would put these in, and that gives you a couple more degrees of camber for whatever application you might need it, whether for some reason you just cannot get it within spec alignment wise, or you're altering the ride height and you need to adjust the camber, whatever the reason might be. This is the ball joint that I have, and a normal one gets pressed in. This one actually gets bolted on, as you can see, so it's a lot easier. You don't need the special tool. By the way, if you don't have the ball joint press to get the old one out, you can just use a hammer and a socket here and just beat the old one out. They're not in there tight. For me, this new one has a groove here, and that's going to match up with this lip, and then as I spin this ball joint, it's going to push it in and out on the control arm. I'll show you this after, so that you can adjust the camber of the front end of your vehicle like I was mentioning before. Like I said, a regular ball joint with no adjustment will get pressed in. This one drops right in, just like this, and it spins around, and it will adjust the camber as you spin it with this hex cutout here. I'm going to start at maximum negative camber, and I will let my alignment professional take it from there. Then on the other side, you have a washer here, and it does have a direction. You can see that it has a little beveled lip on one side. That is so that it can match up with this on the control arm. So it kind of sits in there perfectly flush. And then of course you have the locking nut, and we'll go ahead and tighten this. But you want to make sure that you have your alignment kind of preset before you tighten it, because this also locks in the alignment. Obviously you can loosen it up and adjust later, but you don't want to have to do it a million times. You want to get it as close as possible to the first time. So like I said, I'm just going to start with maximum negative camber, because that's how I roll, and then we'll snug this up. I'm going to have to hold the ball joint with a wrench up here so that it doesn't spin while I try to tighten it. Nice and snug. Take the control arm, put it back in, line up the bolts. Start with this one over here. If you need to use a rubber mallet to line up the control arm with the bolt holes, go ahead and do that. Okay, I got them both lined up. Let's get these snugged up. Now let's keep it at ride height so that as I snug it, the control arm puts itself in its proper position. It's important to torque it at ride height, or tighten it at ride height. Otherwise you put the bushings in a bind and they will prematurely wear. Ride height was about this level here, basically parallel with the ground. So now that it's there, I'm just going to give it a little snug with this ratchet, then I'll grab my longer ratchet and we'll fully tighten it. I won't be able to get a torque wrench in here, so I'm just going to have to do it by feel with a wrench, which is fine. These bolts don't get tightened to a lot. Just make them nice and snug. There we go. If you have a torque wrench that'll fit in here, go ahead. I personally do not. All right, that's tight. These only get torqued to 23 foot-pounds technically, so like I said, tight with a wrench should do the trick. Now bring the knuckle in, and let's get the ball joint repositioned. Sometimes you'll have to bring it down or bring it forward like that. I'm going to try and get the strut back in here. There we go, just like this. You don't have to, but I'm going to use a support underneath so that as I lower the vehicle, it pushes everything up, and bring these two closer together for me so that all I have to do is line them up. Start on your castle nut, we'll bottom it out, snug it. Now let's torque it. 35 foot-pounds is the torque for this. Go ahead and tighten it. Okay, and now you want to make sure that the slot lines up with the cotter pin hole, which it doesn't, so you always want to tighten to line it up and never loosen. Let's see, a little bit more. Right there, should line up. Yep, perfect. Put the cotter pin through, bend it over to lock it in. Let's put the ABS wire back and re-secure it. Had a 10mm nut up here, and then if you just follow it onto the knuckle, two 10mm bolts. Go ahead and put them all back. Don't make them too tight. Remove your support. Get the wheel on. Start on all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and torque them to 80 foot-pounds. Let's put on the 3 mounting nuts that hold the strut at the top. Snug them up. These get torqued to 44 foot-pounds. Now put the strut brace back on. And go ahead and put the mounting nuts for this on. And these you can just make nice and snug. And of course, do the same to the other side. Put these back. Once that's done, go ahead and put all the plastic covers back on. And once you did that, you can take it down to your local alignment shop and have it professionally aligned.